Okay, the topic for lesson 41 is called finding a percent of a number. And just to show you some of the problems where we've already worked with percents, we've done these type of problems. Here they want you to write each as a fraction. So if I took 50% and I want to write that as a fraction, what does percent mean? What's percent mean? Or in other words, what is percent out of? Well, percent means out of 100. So this would be 50 out of 100. And then I can reduce that. Anytime the top number or numerator is exactly half the bottom one, we know that reduces to 1/2. So 50% as a fraction is the same thing as 1/2. 10%, again, a percent means out of 100. So 10 over 100. Now I notice that both of these end in zeros, so I can divide them both by 10. And I get 1 out of 10. So 10% means the same thing as 1/10 or 1 out of 10. 1%, again, percent means out of 100. That's already reduced. So 1 over 100 is the same thing as 1%. So to change a percent to a fraction, all you do is write it over 100 and you make sure it's reduced. Now let's take a look at really what we're getting into in this section. Here they want you to write each of the percents not as a fraction, but they want you to write it as a decimal. Really, this is easier than writing it as a fraction. Here's all you do. To write a percent as a fraction, or excuse me, to write a percent as a decimal, first of all, locate the decimal point. Now in all these, I've got 6 examples up here. The decimal in a whole number is always to the far right. So the first thing we're going to do is locate the decimal point. That's where the decimal point is. Now, to change a percent to a decimal, you always move it 2 places to the left. So let's take 65%. So I'm going to move that decimal 2 places. 1, 2. So I have 0.65. And then we'll stick a 0 in front there. So 65% as a decimal is 0.65. Okay, let's change 30% to a decimal. Well, again, to change a percent to a decimal, it's always 2 places left. So here I would get 0.30, stick a 0 in front, so 0.30. And really I could also write this as just simply 0.3, because what happens when I add a 0 to the end of a decimal? It doesn't change the value. So 0.30 is exactly the same as 0.3. Okay, 60%, let's see, 2 places left, and I would get 0.60 or 0.60. And you could also write it as 0.6. Now it becomes a little harder on the examples to the right. Now notice that here on 8%, I got to add a 0 in front so that I can move it 2 places to the left. So now I have 0, I have 0.08, then I'll stick a 0 in front there, so 0.08. Now on the 6%, I got to add a 0, so I can move it 2 places left, and I get 0.06. 7%, add a 0, so I can move it 2 places left, and I get 0.07. So all you do to change a percent to a decimal is move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Okay, let's take a look at example 2. Now this is a little bit more real life. Okay, and each of these, they want you to take a certain percent of a number. Now, I'm going to use a calculator, and certainly you're going to use one also. So in the first one, it says find 80% of 25. Now, whenever you work with percents, you got to change them to decimals. Notice back in example 1, we practiced changing percents to decimals. So in other words, I need to change 80% to a decimal. So let's see, 1, 2. That would be 0.80. Now, what's of mean in math? Well, it means times. So all I need to do now is just take your calculator, and you're going to take 0.80 or just 0.8, and I'm doing that right now, times 25, and I get 20. So 80% of 25 is 20. Now this makes sense because what would 100% of something be? Remember, 100% of something is all of it. So what's 100% of 25? 25. So I'm not taking quite all of it, I'm just taking almost out of all of it. So 80% would be 20. Now how do we do the second example? Well, I change the percent to a decimal. So it'd be 0.20 times 30. So now I'm going to take on my calculator, I'm going to take 0.2 times 30. So 20% of 30 is 6. Last example, take 60% of 20. Well, change the percent to a decimal. So 0.60 times 20. So I get, so 0.6 or 0.60 times 20 would give me 12. So 60% of 20 would give me 12. So to take a percent of a number, you change the percent to a decimal, you multiply it by whatever you want to take the percent of. Now, the last topic we have here is doing some of these things mentally. Now, 10%, when you take 10% of something, it's really easy. You certainly could do these exactly like example 2. You could do it just like these, except really you don't have to, because whenever you take 10% of something, you should say, hey, this is easy to do mentally. All you do to take 10% of a number is you locate the decimal point. Remember, it's always to the far right in a whole number. And you simply just move it one time. Why once? Because there's just one zero in 10%. So 10% of 350 is 35. 10% of 20 is 2, or 2.0. 10% of 45 is 4.5. And that's it. So to take 10% of a number, you just move the decimal point one place to the left. Remember, if you get caught, if you don't remember that, do them just like these, where you change the percent to a decimal, then multiply it by the number. Now, just to show you how this relates to real life, say you're in a restaurant and your bill is $20. Usually people leave, on the average, maybe a 10% tip. Well, if your meal is $20 and you're going to leave 10% for the waiter or waitress, let's see, 10% of 20, I'm going to leave $2 as a tip. Or say say you're in a restaurant, it's $45 and you're going to leave a 10% tip. Well, you're going to leave $4.50. 4.5 is the same thing as $4.50. So, as you can see, the topic in lesson 41 is taking percent of numbers.